Thank you very much for your welcome. I'm very pleased to be speaking here at Seaford and beginning this series on the book of Job. The book of Job is a remarkable book. It's probably not a book that most people read as their first choice in reading the Bible. It is long, it's a little complex. It has poetry in most of it, just a little bit of narrative at the beginning and the end. Someone once said, thinking about the difficult things that happen in life, if this is the way that God treats his friends, it's hardly surprising that he doesn't have many of them. Now that's the kind of conclusion that you might come to in reading the book of Job. Just imagine the scene. A young couple move to Seaford. They have two small children. They buy a lovely house overlooking the sea. They open a small business in Seaford. November 2019, they write in their Christmas letter, "We are living the dream. It's great to be able to go to the seaside every day and to walk the beach, to walk in the downs. The children love the schools. We've joined a really nice church called King's Church. The business is going well. Just couldn't be better." Fast forward to May, June 2020. The young woman, the wife of the family, posts something on Facebook. "We are really struggling. The business has had to close. We are not able to get furlough and furlough payments because the business has not been running long enough. The house might be under threat because we're not able to afford to keep up the payments. We've been unwell and my father-in-law is in hospital on a ventilator." Life can sometimes be disappointing and puzzling and challenging. Welcome to the world that Job faced. Thinking about Job, I tend to think of Job along the lines of three words: orientation, disorientation, reorientation. Orientation is when life is up, when everything has straight lines and order, when everything is well and we're just very encouraged by how life is going. There's a pattern, a clear pattern and a clear order. And then there's disorientation, when everything gets thrown up into the air, when everything becomes disordered and difficult and challenging, and we wonder what's up, what's down. We're in a tunnel and there is no light at the end of the tunnel. And then there's reorientation, when things are put back the right side up again. It is a relief to be delivered after a time of difficulty. It's a relief to come into the fresh air after the stifling tunnel. It's a relief to see those flecks of light after a long, long journey of darkness. It's not quite being taken to a factory reset of our lives because we've been through the process of being turned upside down. We are wiser. We are deeper, we are more grateful, we've learnt something from the experience. And the book of Job is a journey from orientation through disorientation to final reorientation. We're introduced to Job and his experience of up in the beginning of Job chapter 1. And we're told that he is the greatest man in the East. And the way that that's assessed is by pooling together the assets and resources that Job has as a human being. He has livestock, he has a household of servants, he has 10 children, 7 sons and 3 daughters, and he has a reputation. He is described in these terms: blameless, upright. He feared God and shunned evil. In every area of his life, he demonstrates that which is exemplary. 4 lots of assets, 4 descriptions of his character, probably a way of communicating the completeness or perfection of his lifestyle as a human being. Everything is in order. Everything seems to be just right. But of course we can't take a cloudless day for granted. Maybe that's something that you feel like when things are going well in your life. You think, well, is this going to last? Maybe someone in the family has done something wrong and things are going to unravel. There's an interesting comment there in chapter 1 and verse 5 that early in the morning he would sacrifice on behalf of his children in case any of them had sinned. This was his custom. He wasn't a 5-minute wonder when it came to his spiritual life. He was someone who very consistently reflected on what it was to be faithful before God. Rather like those dads, when there's something wrong, maybe a financial crisis or something that needs to be fixed. The dad says, I've got this. And Job, seemingly by his life, his prayers, his sacrifices, is communicating to his family, I've got this. And then there is disorientation. The up turns into an upside down. The man living with what seems like a perfect world suddenly has to face circumstances that are outside of his control. We live in a world of unseen viruses, of malevolent powers, and they threaten our equilibrium. They threaten the calm and order of our lives, and that's what happens here. So the story has begun with 4 ways in which Job is the richest man, the greatest man in the East, and 4 ways in which he is a person who is godly and consistent. And then there are 4 records of the way that his life suddenly unravels. The loss of livestock, damage to his homes, and finally the snatching away of his 10 children, all dying. 4 times in chapter 4, beginning there, chapter 1 rather, beginning there in verse 15, we have that statement, I alone have escaped to tell you. It's a mounting drama. It's a tragedy, one after another, like dominoes falling in Job's life. It's a little bit like watching live theatre on TV. You can kind of hardly believe that that's been said or that's been done, or that experience in 2001 of 9/11 when we woke up and the early morning news from New York was of an aeroplane that had flown into one of the Twin Towers, and then a little while later another aeroplane flying into the other of those towers. Just unbelievable. Surely things can't get any worse, we said in June during the first lockdown. But here we are again in another lockdown. Surely things can't get worse. Well, sometimes things can get worse. When we were training to think about preaching the book of Job back in October, the news was coming through about the family of Zoe Powell. Zoe Powell, a young woman with 4 young children, was involved in a fatal car crash. She and her 3 eldest children were killed in the crash. Her husband and their youngest child survived with critical injuries. They were moving some of their belongings from their previous house, which had burnt down, pretty much. And they were moving to a new home. And On one of those journeys, you know what it's like when you're moving house, shuttling back from one house to the other. They had this crash. The community was heartbroken. The family was decimated. Their local church was so sorry to hear of what had happened and so bereft of this young couple who had such a desire to serve Jesus in the church and the community and through Zoe's blogging and artistic work. Sometimes it seems as though it's just one thing after another. Or think about the President-elect of the United States, Joe Biden. As a 29-year-old, he was elected to be the Democratic Senator for Delaware. He had a young wife, Naila, and 2 boys and a little girl. Just weeks before going to Washington, his wife was involved in a car crash and she died with a little girl. Later on, one of those sons, in 2015, died of a rare form of cancer. Biden, who's a Catholic, said, "I felt God had played a terrible trick on me and I was angry." He says that just before that accident, his wife Naila had said, "What's going to happen, Joey? Everything is so good." Do you ever feel like that? You sometimes feel, well, everything is just going so well, everything's so good in the family, in the home, in our work, in our church. That feeling that maybe everything is perhaps a bit too good, and maybe it's time for a little rain to fall into our lives. It's possible to be a little bit paranoid about that, but we do live in a world which is unpredictable and puzzling and often painful. Of course, life is lived not just on the surface. We see the surface of Job's life and experience, but in verse 6 of chapter 1, we are given an insight into behind the scenes. And behind the scenes, there's just a whole new world and operation involved. We're told that the angels appear in heaven, and with the angels, the Satan appears. Note that it's not Satan, it's not necessarily saying that the big man Satan appeared, but the Satan, the accuser, the mudslinger, appears before God in heaven. And the mudslinger begins to throw out accusations concerning Job. "Where have you been? Oh, just hanging about in the earth," the Satan says. "Have you considered my servant Job?" God says. "Well, you put a hedge around him," the mudslinger says, "and he's serving you because everything is good. You just rip the hedge from around him. You take away the force field that seems to be around him. You take away the benefits of his life, and quite frankly, he is going to drop you like a bag of hot potatoes. He's going to abandon you and curse you to your face." Of course, the character of Job is the pivot around which this book turns. His character, what he says of God and how he says it, is going to be the thing that will be examined again and again throughout this book. The mudslinger says, well, you just rip away the fence and you'll see what he's thinking. Job, he probably is like those people who think that religion is like putting a coin into a machine. When you put your coin of religious observance into the top of the machine, out comes the chocolate bar in the drawer below. You stop giving him the chocolate bar and he'll stop putting in the coins. Later, chapter 2, verses 4 and 5, the mudslinger returns after devastation has been let loose upon Job. And he says, at least Job has his health. I wonder whether that's ever been said to you in times of misfortune. At least you have your health. At least Job has his health. Skin for skin. You touch him physically. You know what a low threshold of pain men have. Well, just touch him physically and then you'll see what kind of response he'll give. What do you do when you face trouble? Do you go all silent on God? Do you give him a piece of your mind? Do you stop going to church? Because what's the point? You know, if you can't guarantee a quiet life by going to the church, why bother going to church? How does Job respond? Well, in the first place, Job responds with grief. In verse 20, we read that he tore his robe and shaved his head, and he grieves, heart-cracking grief. Paul says to the Thessalonian Christians, we grieve, but not as those who have no hope. Christians grieve, tears and smiles like us in you, we might sing at Christmas time. Tears are appropriate for God's people because we do live in a world which is broken. One of the words that we read in the New Testament, the shortest verse in the Bible in John 11, Jesus wept. He tore his clothes, he shaved his head, and he grieved. But he also expresses trust. He stands before God, as it were, naked as he was born, hairless after being shaved. And he says, naked I came from my mother's womb, and naked I shall depart. The Lord has given, and the Lord has taken away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. And Job did not sin in anything that he had said. The Satan said, you know, you take away the protection and Job will curse you. Job doesn't. Job doesn't do what the accuser says he would do. He trusts. Now, this is a remarkably counterintuitive thing in the 21st century. In the 21st century, we live in an age of entitlement. We feel as though we are owed a good life. And when our life is not good, when rubbish begins to emerge in our life, we begin to ask questions like, what have I done to deserve this? Surely I deserve better than this. Although we tend not to follow the logic of that when we see wonderful things coming into our lives, we don't often say, what did I do to deserve this? This lavish loading of my life with benefits. What a remarkable thing this is. It's very easy to take for granted the benefits of our lives and to grumble when those benefits are not so freely available. Job recognized that when we lose everything, we have not lost the one who gives us everything. It's important to recognize that. You see, if we worship the everything, when everything disappears, we have nothing. If we worship the giver of everything, when everything is peeled away, we still have him. And how vital that is, how vital that was for Job, how vital it might be for you today or in a coming day. Piers Morgan reminded his viewers of a cartoon that appeared in a red-top newspaper that was sent to Joe Biden's father after the tragedies that hit Biden's life. And the cartoon depicts these two Vikings, and one is asking, why me? And we all know that question, why me? Why this? Why now? And the other Viking is also asking a question, why not? Why me? Why not? None of us are entitled to a cloudless sky in every part of our lives. We need to recognise that any benefit we have as a mercy is a gift that can be given and can be taken away, that can appear and disappear, that can become clear and can simply fade away and drift away. Suddenly then, Job's health is completely broken. He's lost everything. All he has is God and his wife. Now, Job's wife is not given a name in the book of Job. And probably, like many of the men of his time, he might have had more than one wife. But think of Mrs. Job. If Mrs. Job was the only wife that Job had, she was grieving the loss of her world, the security of her home, and of her 10 children. Just imagine that. If she was the mother, she had spent 7.5 years pregnant and half a life in childcare. She too was grieving. She too was experiencing what it was to lose everything. She turns to Job, and in verse 9 of chapter 2, are you still maintaining your integrity? Curse God and die. It's not really the kind of message that you want to receive at difficult times. But what's the point? What's the point of holding on to your integrity at this moment? Just give up. Just curse God and die. Now, the word for curse and bless are the same words in Hebrew, same word in Hebrew, and sometimes it's not entirely clear which is one and which is the other. But here it seems to be pretty plain that she is saying, be done with God. Just curse him. Just get it out of the way. Trust. Job exercises trust. He replies to his wife, you are speaking like a foolish woman. It's almost as though you're speaking trash words, not faithful words. Shall we accept good from God and not evil, trouble? In all of this, Job did not sin with what he said. Now, it's important to recognise this. We don't believe in dualism. We don't believe that there is an equal power of God and an equal power of the devil. God is the one who orders our life. Somehow that's the way the Hebrew mind thought. Good things, trouble, they came from God. And therefore we can believe that God can get us out of them because he's not somehow powerless in the face of difficulties, powerless in the face of trouble. That's why we can pray. That's why we can ask him to help us. And then there's silence. Job is silent. He has 3 friends that join him there that we read in chapter 2, verses 12 and 13. And they're silent for 7 days because they saw how great his suffering was. Now, whatever we might think of the 3 friends, and we're going to see that sometimes they were not as wise as they could be in what they said to Job or how they said things to Job. What we can say, though, is that for 7 days they were brilliant in terms of giving Job space and allowing the space of silence for him to process what had happened in his experience. A 7-day silence was the traditional period of time that you gave to mourning the dead in the Old Testament. And maybe they are also thinking, well, Job's life, it feels as though it's all over. This is like mourning a death. It's rather like those people who have the experience of a loved one with dementia, and they talk about the serial bereavement. They talk about the gradual loss and losses of a person over a period of time. Although the person is not dead or buried, it feels as though you are beginning to lose them. And then, after 7 days of silence, there is a scream. There is a cry deep from the heart of Job. And the cry is, why? Strikingly, most of the chapter 3, is a long, drawn-out description of that question, why? Why was I ever born if I was going to end like this? I kind of feel like the Duke of York's men. I've been marched up to the top of the hill and marched down again. What's the point of being born? Wouldn't it have been better if I was stillborn and had to avoid all the good bits and all the bad bits? Better to have loved and lost than to never love at all? Job doesn't feel like that. He feels raw and bereft. He feels the pain of his loss. Can a godly person talk like this? Can someone who really believes in God have this kind of attitude and speak in those terms? Can a Christian speak like this, or are Job's words sub-Christian? I've always taken great comfort from those words that Paul writes to the Corinthian Christians in 2 Corinthians 1, where he says this: "We do not want you to be uninformed, brothers, about the hardships we suffered in the province of Asia. We were under great pressure, far beyond our ability to endure, so that we despaired even of life. Indeed, in our hearts we felt the sentence of death. But this happened that we might not rely on ourselves, but on God, who raises the dead. He has delivered us from such a deadly peril, and he will deliver us. On him we have set our hope, that he will continue to deliver us, as you help us by your prayers. Then many will give thanks on our behalf for the gracious favour granted us in answer to the prayers of many." We were under great pressure, far beyond our ability to endure, so that we felt within us even the sentence of death. Yes, darkness can be experienced in the heart of the Christian, that sense of feeling as though we are up beyond our neck, that we're well out of our depth, that we're puzzled, we don't know what's going on, and we don't know our way out. Job is speaking into the darkness, but he's speaking into the darkness to someone. He's asking a question because he believes that someone is listening. The 20th century preacher Campbell Morgan said that there are answers to the questions of Job in the life of Jesus. I think that's a really helpful observation. Job is enveloped in darkness. He feels abandoned. He has lost everything. And 2,000 years ago, we read of another innocent sufferer in darkness at midday, nailed to a cross, who looks up into the heavens and addresses someone who he knows is present and asks a question. My God, why have you forsaken me?" You see, Job is crying out in the darkness. Why? Because there is a God. There is a God that we can address. There is a God in the dark tunnel that we can believe will bring us through the tunnel. We might be in a moment of disorientation, but God can reorientate our lives. He can turn us the right side up. There's a glimmer of hope in this. The question presupposes an answer. The being puzzled, the dark plot points to a denouement, an end point where all things will be well. When soldiers liberated one of the death camps after the Second World War, they found some words etched on a wall in one of the rooms of the barracks there. I believe in the sun, even when it's not shining. I believe in love, even when I do not feel it. I believe in God, even when he is silent. From the death camps, to the ash heap of Job, to the cross of Calvary, we too can say that. As Paul reminded the Corinthian Christians, we walk by faith, not by sight. Maybe God is saying to you today, trust me with your life in the light moments and the dark moments. Trust me to sustain you, for my grace is sufficient for you. Trust me to deliver you, because I've demonstrated my involvement with you, my love for you, my commitment to you, by giving you my Son, that you might know the assurance of my presence and the promise of my rescue. Amen.